Welcome back to Blacksheep Barbell Podcast. Today we have Don Demetrakeas on the show. He's a competitive powerlifter, and he also knows the past few guests we've had on the show with Drew, Kevin, and Dan. He works out at Odd Lifts Gym, which is Kevin's gym, and also Omnivo Fitness, which Dan trains at. He's got crazy numbers. He's got a 667-pound squat, a 385-pound bench, and a 755-pound deadlift. Those are absolutely crazy numbers, so I'm excited to talk to you, Don. Welcome to the show. All right, how you doing, man?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
Good. I'm really good. I just wanted to touch on, your powerlifting journey and everything. Obviously, you work out with Kevin and Drew. So how did you get started with that?
So it's kind of a funny story because my wife had she knew Kevin before I did. She's actually an amazing athlete herself. She's actually the one that got me started into powerlifting. She had done powerlifting herself, strongman, Muay Thai, CrossFit,
Wow.
and she had actually gone to see a strongman um, convention, just kind of like some speakers, and Kevin was actually one of the speakers there. And I was probably in my fourth year of bodybuilding, and I was starting to get a bit burned out. It was difficult for me to, keep up with the diet because I traveled for work. And, I was looking for something different. And she had said, "Hey, why don't you try, powerlifting?" And I said, "I know nothing about it, So we actually went to go watch a meet at Rochester Performance Gym. I said, "Okay, this looks cool." And we happened to be having a dinner date with Kevin and his wife and another couple.
Wow.
And he and I locked in right away at dinner. And I contacted him the next day and I said, "Hey, I'm looking for a new coach, and I was wondering if you wanted to be my coach." And he said, "You know what? Why don't you come train with me and let's see if you like it because you may not like it here. I'm going to try and turn you into me because I know what works for me." And that was the start of a glorious relationship. And for me, I from bodybuilding, I didn't know what low bar squatting
Mm-hmm.
was. So I my wife and I were just actually talking about this. We were at a powerhouse and she's trying to teach me how to low bar squat. And I've got an empty bar on my back trying to find my rear delts to rest the bar on. I'm like, I'm going to drop it. I'm going to drop it. So it was, just the way it all came about. And, she says, "All right, well, let's try and deadlift." And the first time I mean, I've got no form whatsoever. Um, I pull like 550.
Oh my
And she's like,
gosh.
"Okay, I think maybe we're onto something here." And I had, done a couple meets before I had joined up with Kevin. And it wasn't until I started training with Kevin and Drew and Dan that, things came together. I bodybuilding, it's challenging in itself. But what I wasn't prepared for is for a bodybuilding training session, albeit extremely difficult, I can do it by myself.
Yeah.
When you start powerlifting, I think Drew said it, you have to get in with a crew. Because if once you start, benching and squatting heavy, you need to have at least three or four people with you to be able to help you spot.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the big difference and transition of me going from bodybuilding into powerlifting. So it was different for me to see these. At that time there was 8, 10 people in Kevin's. I was part of. You heard Kevin say Odd Lifts 2.0.
Yeah.
That's where I came into the picture.
Yeah.
Um, and you got 8 to 10 guys that are slinging weight around that I'm like, holy shit, what did I get myself into? But that's when things really started to come together, and Kevin has been able to be, a beacon of inspiration and being able to help me get from point A to point B. To be able to even navigate the sport.
Yeah.
So it's been a very, a huge blessing to be able to stumble into a group that's accepted me.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like I think Drew said it best, if you don't click with the guys, it's something that it becomes very awkward, and it's you need that camaraderie to be able to have the guys drive you and to be able to comment on what they're doing without it being awkward.
Yeah.
So it really created a fantastic environment for
Mm-hmm.
me.
And it's always better to work out, with like, I feel like with a group of people like that, like you all have the same goals in
There is
mind.
no doubt,
Yeah.
no doubt.
Yeah.
There were many a bodybuilding days where I had headphones in, late night training sessions at a 24-hour gym where I was by myself.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the days, where you've got an hour plus cardio to do, and you can talk yourself into quitting cardio every time. I don't care what,
Yeah.
it's like long distance, running. I could talk myself into quitting that after 5 minutes, if that long.
Yeah.
So you really had, but the one thing that it did teach me is discipline.
Yeah.
I needed to be disciplined. And when when I'm being coached by somebody, I want to be the best athlete that coach has.
Mm-hmm.
Call it a sickness, but my dad was a very very structured person. There was never anything that was given to me. I had to work for everything. So I think at an early age, I was taught that, if you're going to do something that's worth it, don't half-ass it. And I think that's the one really big thing that I took away from bodybuilding is even though you're by yourself, you need to be able to check all the boxes.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. Like you came from bodybuilding to powerlifting. I don't know if we've even talked to somebody that really did that. How do you find like your enjoyment in working out over like bodybuilding and powerlifting? Because for me, the reason why me and my cousin, my co-host, that we do more powerlifting lifts is because I feel like it's just more fun in the gym to have this goal set in mind. Like, okay, I want to hit this PR and work up towards that through weeks and months and finally hit that. With bodybuilding, I feel like it's just a lot of it's more looks focused. Obviously, which one did you find more enjoyment out of?
Believe it or not, in amateur bodybuilding, there's still quite a bit of politics.
Mm,
And if you look at bodybuilding as just its, core, you have six judges that are looking for something.
mm-hmm.
You don't always know what that something is. You just need to do the best that you can come in as peeled as you can. And you hope that when you're hitting your pose, a couple of the judges are looking your way.
Yeah.
So it's just as much about timing
Mm-hmm.
as it is anything else. And really, when you come out on stage for bodybuilding, you've got 60 seconds to impress six judges.
Yeah.
And like I said, if you hit your best pose, and the judge or two of them are looking down, making notes on their scorecard, you may have missed the opportunity to get where you need to be. And like I said, there was some politics that I was struggling with. And when my wife suggested powerlifting, it seemed very straightforward because you either lift the weight or you don't.
Mm,
There's not subjectivity. I mean, you can talk about judging and whether or not you're hitting depth or whatnot, but set all of that aside. Here's a weight, lift it or not. Simple as that. There's
yeah.
not a lot of subjectivity there. It's yes or no.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it was very clear that if you set yourself up for success and have an intelligent plan in front of you,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, Kevin taught me very early on that the competition day should be the easiest day of training. You go through the suck, you go through everything, you get that out of the way, and training day is going to be the easiest. So when you look at the transition between the two, you're trying to impress six people with something you've worked a year on based on, diet, hard work for a year versus three judges determining whether or not you can lift, you know, X amount of weight over three attempts over three lifts.
Yeah.
So for me, it was um, it was a transition that made sense
Mm-hmm.
because of, when you look at the ultimate goal that you're looking for. Sometimes you would get feedback from judges. They would record You could actually reach out to the judges. They would give you feedback on what you need to do. Of course, everyone says you're going to need to be bigger. Of course, everyone's going to say you're going to need to be leaner.
Mm-hmm.
But you just busted your ass for a year, and you're thinking, I don't know if I can get bigger. I don't know if I can get leaner,
Yeah.
And I think at my leanest, and this my a friend of mine actually owned a DEXA business, and he was the leading, or the one of the few salesmen of DEXA, which is the most accurate body fat count there is. I think it was 2 weeks before I was going on stage. I was at 9% body fat, and these guys
Wow.
are telling me I need to get leaner. And
Oh,
I'm like, yeah, I don't know if I can do that,
no.
So,
Yeah, that's
um,
dangerously low.
yeah. So, and when I look at the two sports, and being able to, as far as how it fits into my life, because like I said, maintaining the diet for bodybuilding and maintaining a diet for powerlifting is so incredibly different for me. It was difficult. I was cranky, because for work, no one wanted to be around me because I was such an asshole. I was having to warm up fish in the microwave at work. Everyone hated me just for that.
Mm-hmm.
So in having to, the last month before a show, it's probably one of the most unhealthiest times in a person's life. You're starting to deplete water. You're starting to cut back in calories. And for powerlifting, I walk around at my competing weight.
Mm.
I walk around at 230 plus or minus 3 or 4 pounds, and I compete at 242
Yeah.
because the one thing that I did learn from bodybuilding is you don't change the plan the week of the show. So, I see guys cutting 15, 17 pounds to make weight, and the day that they lift, their body's in such discomfort because you're trying to put all of the water and the fluid and the food back in your system. That's not how you trained
Mm-hmm.
for 12 weeks leading up to it.
Yeah.
So my weight is what it is. So the day that I step on the platform is no different than when I'm squatting at Kevin's or benching at Kevin's or doing deadlifts at Kevin's.
Yeah.
So to me, that sets me up for success. And that's, you take some of those disciplines out of one sport and translate it into another.
Yeah, and I definitely could see like bodybuilding, like that discipline is crazy, like just all that water you can't intake and everything. I mean, it's
Yeah.
so you hear like these actors talk about it, like the people that play Superman or something talk about, yeah, when I do a shirtless scene, I gotta like dehydrate myself for the first 3 days.
Yeah.
And with powerlifting, obviously, you just have to get, the heavier you are, the heavier you can lift usually. So you don't have
Yeah.
to really watch like what you eat all the time and stuff like that, which can be good and bad.
Yeah, and honestly, if someone was paying me $200 million to lose weight, I'd
Yeah.
get to whatever weight you wanted me to. But if I'm doing this just out of sheer enjoyment, I'm
Yeah.
going to do the best I can. But yeah, and when you start to think about where you want to be weight wise, and yeah, weight moves weight, but at the same time, um, the older I get, I want to be cognizant of the health aspect as
Yeah.
well, because the heaviest that I ever competed at was 238, and I felt disgusting.
Mhm.
And that's just 8 pounds more than where I'm at right now. But for me, I carry all of my weight. It's kind of like a visceral fat over my stomach. And
Mhm.
that's from, in bodybuilding, the more times you cut weight, your body doesn't always put fat back in the same places. And unfortunately, mine always comes back in my stomach. And I look back at the photos that my daughter took for that meet, and you know, I'm as body dysmorphic as the next guy because if I don't, it's always, gosh, I look fat. I need to lose weight. Gosh, I look small. I need to get bigger. So, but I looked and felt disgusting.
Mhm.
And it's not a weight that I'll ever compete at again. And again, still not at 242,
Yeah.
but still at a weight that I was extremely uncomfortable in.
Yeah, I mean, it is easy to just always critique yourself. You're the biggest critique of yourself. I mean, even though you may think you looked horrible, you probably look better than 90% of the population. So
Yeah. And it, yeah, and it's funny because one of the guys that I've trained with for a long time, his name is Britton, and he is an amazing human being.
Mhm.
And we both have tats, and sometimes you have to, get a spray bottle and spray a cat
Yeah.
when they're being bad. So we have this thing where he goes, "Don't make me get the water bottle out," because the minute when you're critiquing yourself, you don't allow yourself to celebrate the small wins,
Mm-hmm.
and that can start to play a mental game on yourself. So he's one to always call me on that, and I don't know he will ever understand how much I appreciate that. He'll say, "Well, hey, you just did this," and he'll do the spray bottle, and it really brings me back. And when you start to you asked me about the difference between bodybuilding and powerlifting. That right there, Britton is one of the guys that we train with that competes with us.
Mm-hmm.
That is there checking me mentally just as much as he's helping me with spotting me on squats, coming in on a day to help me to be able to hit a heavy bench. He's helping to make sure that I'm staying in a good mental place.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about the isolation sometimes that you have as a bodybuilder, you don't always have that. So sometimes you can start to go down a really dark path in that internal monologue and how you're talking to yourself, because there was a time that I'm not sure I would talk to my worst enemy the way that I talk to myself based on how my
Mm-hmm.
training was going.
Yeah.
And that is just as much detrimental as having a piss poor diet, not being able to lift when you need to. So the guys that I train with at Odd Lifts are all encompassing when we look at what makes up a good lifter, to make sure
Yeah.
that we're there mentally, making sure that we're there physically, and making sure we're safe when we're lifting
Yeah.
heavy.
And that's why it's great, like I said, to have like a group to lift with, because they're kind of
Yes.
like a support system in a sense too for all of you guys. Like you all are supporting each other. Like somebody, could be feeling that way or thinking that way, and you're like, dude, you just hit this. Like you just did this.
Right.
Like, come on,
Yeah.
you know.
And we have short memories sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said you met Kevin. So you met Kevin with that dinner that you went to. You didn't know him before that.
That's
That's just
correct.
like all the right things landing at the right place at the right
You have
time.
no idea.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
And they trust me that. And when you hear Kevin and Drew talk about the guys really wanting each other to be better at lifting, there are times I left there, I was like, fuck this place, i'm
Mm-hmm.
not i'm not going back, because they were, it's sometimes, I'm not going to say they're brutal, but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it was brutal to hear.
Yeah.
I'm thinking I'm doing something right, that was garbage.
Mm-hmm.
But it is that you know the really caring,
Mm-hmm.
that you can have that relationship, that they feel comfortable in saying it, and me being able to hear it.
Yeah.
So in the early days, I had a lot of improving to do. So it was sometimes difficult to train, but I wouldn't change any of those days for anything in the
Mm-hmm.
world, because it's got me to where I am now.
Yeah, and it pushes you to do better. So like
Absolutely.
that's why it's important. In 2022, you had like you had to like come back to the gym, right? You had like a little health scare
Yeah.
that happened, and you had to go to the hospital, and you lost some
Yeah.
weight. So how was that? With you losing some weight and being out of the gym for a certain amount of time, how was that comeback for you?
It was difficult. So to give a little bit of backstory to that, in 2000, or when I was 14 years old, I was diagnosed with colitis, which is a
Mm-hmm.
disease that affects the large intestine. It's open sores on the intestinal lining that never really heal. Um, and I battled that probably for 8 or 9 years. And colitis is one of those diseases that it won't kill you, but the drugs you take to keep it in check will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And one of the primary drugs for that was called prednisone, which is a steroid and cortisone compound. And I was on such high volumes of that my body I would just retain so much water. And the original doctor that diagnosed me retired, and I went to see a new doctor, and he tried a new drug to try to get me off of prednisone, and it landed me back in the hospital. It made me so sick. And he said, "Don, we're out of drugs to try." And they decided to do at that time, which was an experimental surgery, um, and completely removed my large intestine.
Wow.
They call it a total colectomy, or slang is J pouch, where they take your small intestine and kind of loop it back over one another like the shape of a J, and just kind of reconnect the plumbing. So I had that surgery when I was 23. Fast forward to that day, what happens is when you cut through the intestinal wall, as things start to kind of heal and grow back together, you get this scar tissue, and they're called adhesions. So what they do is they kind of latch onto your small intestine, and they twist and they contort and they twist and they contort, and it can cause what's called a small bowel obstruction, which means that food's going to go down and it's going to get stuck.
Mm. Yeah.
And you kind of feel that you kind of start to go back on a liquid diet, but ultimately, if it doesn't clear on its own, you go into the hospital, they put you on a clear liquid diet. If it doesn't resolve on itself, they'll generally have to do surgery. Luckily, I've had probably 3 or 4 of these over the last 10 years. Luckily, they've all resolved on themselves, but I'm on a liquid diet now for a week, and
Mm.
I'm dropping probably 10 pounds. So as I come in, and of course, we equated these to big events in my life: prepping for bodybuilding, prepping for powerlifting, where my weight is swinging, my diet's all over the place. So I've been able to control that a little bit more over the last couple of years. But I was prepping for a meet in Ohio, and I had just come out of the hospital. And at that point, you have to start with soft food. So it took me almost 2 weeks just to get back to solid foods,
Wow.
because you don't want to, really start just cramming any food in, because then, everything's already still kind of irritated. And so it took me a long time to kind of get back to going, and your strength is gone.
Yeah.
So it was a day by day kind of grind back into that. And at that point, I'm like, I'm just going to go into the meet, and whatever happens, happens. And I got fairly lucky to have a good meet, but at the same time, it was a smaller meet. So I didn't have as much time to rest between lifts.
Yeah.
But I still pulled together a nice total. At that point, I was still competing. I started my first powerlifting meet was in sleeves, and then I went to wraps after that. So this meet was in wraps.
Okay.
Um, but what we found out is that as we were starting to get into deadlifts, people were dropping out of the meet. So my time between attempts was probably 3 to 4 minutes,
Oh man.
rather than when you have a flight of 15, it can
Yeah.
be 20 to 25 minutes. So it comes to my third attempt, and I think I was going for 760, and I said I can't. I need some time,
Yeah.
So they actually, I think they gave me like 4 minutes, and I just got stapled.
Mm.
But I was able to pull 744 that meet,
Yeah.
and that when you look at what I put my body through in that meet. I think it happened one other time where I just pulled out of the meet and said, "Listen, I need more time to be able to get back on my feet." But it was a meet that I wanted to do to kind of get kind of keep the progress going. But yeah, whenever you land in the hospital, and especially when it's only water that you can take in for the course of a week,
Yeah.
yeah, I was just shedding pounds by the day.
Yeah, so you're basically just intermittent fasting for a week. So,
Yeah, pretty much, pretty
yeah.
much.
But I
Yeah,
liked how even on your post that you set some goals aside. Like you said, I want to hit 315 squat 5x5 like by Monday,
yeah,
and I want to hit
yeah,
405 5x5 squat.
yeah.
Eventually, and I'm sure you've hit those by then. And setting those goals though can make you look towards something, make you train towards something. So once you hit it, it's even more, satisfying, especially coming from something that you came from.
Yeah, and again, that was my boy Britton who was
Mm-hmm.
in there. You know, we were at a powerhouse, and he was there with me, shoulder to shoulder, making sure that I didn't do something stupid.
Yeah.
Again, there with the spray bottle if I needed it. But at that point, before I could even get into, back into powerlifting, it was one of those events that I've got to go through a hypertrophy phase to just actually put muscle back on,
Yeah.
and it's humbling. When you're looking, you're at a gym that everyone knows that months prior you're doing twice this weight to the point where you look like you're emaciated and you're struggling with what used to be an opener. So it's those types of life events for everybody that I think that sets you up for success because I've had plenty of times in my life where I had high expectations and life just kicks your ass and it just checks you and says, nope,
Yeah.
we're gonna bring you down a couple pegs.
Yeah.
And it's work your way back to even to that starting point. So,
Mm-hmm.
and without that surgery, there was no way I would have been able to have children because on the doses of prednisone that I was on, they were saying that um, you know, child disfigurement was almost at 90%,
Oh wow.
So yeah, so it was a life changing surgery that took me almost a year to recover from. But obviously, it also created some challenges with with the small bowel obstructions. But again, I would rather deal with that and have my two daughters than continue to struggle with a drug that just really attacks your liver. And so you look back and you make choices for a reason. And at that point, even earlier, I feel like at 56, I'm in better shape than I was at 26. And that's
Wow.
just based on, my body just going through all of the issues. And it's not that it was a choice that I made to live unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
I was just trying to get through the day to day. And it's funny because Kevin jokes and always says that my body hates me. And it's, there are some times that I think it's true. But at the same time, you're just trying to get through life with whatever it's trying to deal to you at that given day.
Yeah, and it's definitely got to help too that you were already training before that with your bounce back as well, like muscle memory and everything. But yeah,
Absolutely.
it's always important to have, you have a passion for it, and that's what's important because like a lot of people could have had that happen to them, and they're like, I'm done, I'm never doing it again. But see, right now you're saying you think you're better now than you were, in your 20s, which is amazing. That just goes to show that you can always improve, right? You can always improve if you keep working towards something.
Yeah, and you know what? When you have the knowledge of the group of guys that I train with, um, you have to work harder at not improving.
Yeah.
Let's put it
Yeah.
that way. There were times in Odd Lifts 2.0, just showing up and
Mhm.
listening to what the guys were talking about was a masterclass in powerlifting.
Yeah.
And again, those are days that I will never forget because when you listen to the guy, I mean, Kevin had so much time already under his belt, and I'm still wet behind the ears. I had doing my first powerlifting meet in 2018. Just listening to the guys, understanding that the struggle's real, and if you want to be good, you're going to have to kind of get outside, your comfort zone and place the trust in the people around you that you're going to be safe,
Yeah.
right? And that was one thing that we learned very, very quickly. They didn't know me at that time. It's like, hey, here's what's going to happen. Here's how we're going to spot you. Here's what's going to happen. If you can't come out of the hole, just stay with the bar. We'll get you back into the
Mhm.
mono.
Yeah.
And I find that discussion being had by me with other people.
Mhm.
Hey, before we do this, let's talk about what's going to happen if something goes wrong.
Yeah.
And I think if you have those conversations, again, you're able to place and receive trust from other people, and to be able to create that environment again where people are safe. Because the person spotting could get hurt more than the person lifting if
Yeah.
that conversation isn't had.
Yeah, communication, it's always important with things like that.
Absolutely.
But even like normal conversations in the gym, like learning from one another, that very thing right there, those conversations in the gym is exactly what got us like wanting to start a podcast because like these conversations that we're having, would be great as that, like to try to get information out there.
Yeah, and I'm also very, very blessed. My wife is a physician's assistant, so she's incredibly smart, and she's, like I said, she's got an incredible past of athleticism herself.
Hmm.
So honestly, I'm very, very blessed to be able to be working with Trevor Jaffe right now as my coach. And there were a couple movements, and I'm like, my body just doesn't do this. Like
Yeah.
they were accessory movements, and one of them was he called it's called a Jaffe extension, where you're just kind of you've got weight between your legs. It's kind of a sumo setup. She goes,
Hmm.
"All right, show me the video. Let's go upstairs." And I had just had a long squat day. She goes, "No, let's go upstairs right now." And she broke it down step by step, and I was able to do that. So, I'm even able to get that type of support at home. And I think it's important as a lifter to humble yourself,
Yeah,
to realize you're not the smartest person in the room, and
exactly.
sometimes just to shut your mouth and say, "I don't know how, help,"
Hmm.
and let the people who've done this before help you through it.
Yeah.
Because it's the people that think they're the most amazing lifter out there that probably aren't progressing, that are difficult to coach, and probably even difficult to be around the minute you try and offer a correction or a suggestion.
Yeah, and it's always important to learn, because obviously with injuries too, you can get injured very easily if you're not doing something correctly.
Yeah.
Have you ever had to deal with any injuries throughout your lifting career?
I have. So I used to do mixed grip deadlifting, and
Yeah.
I tore my left bicep.
Wow,
Um,
really?
yeah,
Oh.
yep, and that was again in preparation for another meet, and that was just one of those things where everything was going way, way too good.
It's going way too good for something
Yeah,
not to.
and I think I had a rep scheme of five.
Oh.
Rep one, smoke show. Rep two, smoke show. Rep three, as I'm standing up, I feel this excruciating pain in my left arm and drop the weight.
Oh.
And yeah, so I think it was 2 weeks after that I had surgery, and again that's life saying, "Yep, we're just going to bring you back a couple pegs," and that rehab was a bit more difficult, um, because when I was going through physical therapy, I didn't have the most amazing group, and I
Mhm.
think that if you get hurt in doing something athletic, having someone that is athletic doing your PT is night and day.
Yeah.
Because I had had some shoulder issues, and I found there was a local U of M rehab facility a couple miles from my house here in Brighton, um, and the top three physical therapists were college athletes still playing hockey or a power lifter. And
Yeah.
those three guys were dedicated to me. They said, at any given time when you come in here, you're getting one of us. And that physical therapy versus what I had to go through with my torn bicep, I ended up just stopped going
Yeah.
because I felt like I could progress myself faster when I was dealing with a group that, to me, didn't understand what I was doing when I hurt this. To take a very light band and say do this 10 times, and I said, okay, I did it 30. What's next? To just not understand the whole linear periodization at that point.
Yeah.
And when I contrast the two facilities, I will ask many, many more, knock on wood, I won't need physical therapy anytime soon, but if I do, I will be asking a lot of questions.
Yeah.
So yeah, so the torn bicep was a bit longer of a return because I took rehab on myself because I just wasn't getting anything out of it.
Yeah, and sometimes, depending on what kind of PT you're doing, you can just do it at home. Like you literally just find it online. I mean, I kind
Yeah,
of had that experience. I had to do some PT last year for like my lower back, which I hurt on a deadlift. And it just I don't know. I don't think it did anything. And so like it's just like the normal stuff. I mean, it helped with certain things, but it's like decompress your back. It's like I read this online. Like, why am I coming here? Like, I know how to do this.
To me, it's just having the right people in the right place to be able to
Yeah.
get you, right as rain. And it's funny because I'm trying to, anytime I am doing any type of arm exercises like a dumbbell curl, I try to do more with my left arm because it's
Yeah.
about 3/4 of an inch smaller than my right arm, and it's something that I'm very cognizant of, and it bothers me. But again, and it forced me to learn hook grip, and it's
Mm-hmm.
a much more safer position for my biceps. And I was extremely lucky. Gary Knurek, who works out at Kevin's as well, was doing hook grip at a time and actually suggested a couple things that I try. And I got very, very lucky that I adapted to it like I did because I had said, well, geez, if I'm going to do hook grip, I probably have to go to do sumo. And I spent 2 weeks in sumo, and I started thinking, I'm like, that was a dumb thought. Why can't I just do conventional and do hook grip? Because
Yeah.
I wasn't seeing many people doing conventional with hook grip,
Mm-hmm.
and it was always over under.
Yeah.
But I was very lucky to adapt to it fairly
Yeah,
quick.
that's actually an injury I haven't really thought of with doing deadlift because I mean I do I do that grip and I haven't thought of that like your bicep getting injured from that. That's
Yeah,
that is
and
scary.
there are
Yeah.
some people that will switch which hand is over, which hand is
Mm-hmm.
under, as they're warming up to not really put too much emphasis on one bicep.
Yeah.
But I think if you're doing over under, it's one of those inevitable injuries, just based on you know how much you're elongating that long head of the bicep and how much pressure you're putting under it.
And hook grip, it is like harder because obviously the bar can slip out a little easier. Do you use straps too or no?
Generally, what I'll do is the way that my sets are set up is I will do all of my warm up um, without straps.
Mm-hmm.
And then I get to a top weight, and let's say I've got a 3x5 at X weight. I will do my first working set without straps, and then I'll do my remaining sets with straps.
Okay.
Because especially with multiple reps, and I'm not doing touch and go, so I'm doing dead stops,
Mm-hmm.
I have more of a chance to just shred my hands.
Yeah.
So to try to save that, I'll use the straps for the remaining two sets,
Mm-hmm.
just to kind of save the hands a little bit. And I, again, knock on wood, um, have yet to feel like a weight is slipping out of my hand, so grip strength is not an issue.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I usually did use straps, but I went to this big event in South Carolina for Serenix with their big like lifting get together, and they were like preaching about not using straps because of obviously grip strength and everything. And I guess that could be true with any lifts, like even bench press, like don't do straps because I guess it does help you. But it is hard. It's difficult to even if you've been like training with straps to go without it. Like it's hard to do that.
Yeah, and you know what? I think that there are certain lifts that when I look at like a lot of back exercises,
Mhm.
or if I'm doing um, pull-ups,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, if I look at exercises like that, I ask myself, what's going to give out first? Is my grip going to give out first, or is it the muscle that I'm trying to work? And if
Mhm.
the answer is my grip, I'm probably going to use some straps. I
Yeah.
use straps all the time, especially if I'm going with like a heavy back exercise, like a heavy dumbbell row or a heavy lat pull down. I'm going to use straps
Mhm.
because again, I kind of want to use my hands just as hooks, to be able to pull the weight and get the most amount of work in the muscle that I'm trying to build.
Yeah. Yeah. And I understand. Like with back day too, it is like better, I think, to use them just because of that. Your grip can give out. Yeah. I wanted to talk to you too about so your PRs that you have. So you have a 667 squat, 385 bench, and a 755 deadlift. When
Yes.
did you hit those? Was that all in the same meet?
Yeah, that was I think gosh, I'm trying to remember what year it was. I think it was the 2020, it would have been earlier in the year. I think it was Winter Warfare at Rochester Performance Gym.
Mm-hmm.
All three of those lifts were at that. Well, I take that back. I hit 650 as as a squat, and it was 666.7 at the meet in
Okay.
Toledo. So they were at different meets, but the best, um, when I was in wraps, that meet was a meet of meets, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first meet that I did under the odd lifts flag. Um, and I had, you know, I was, up to that point before I started training with Kevin, I always had a coach that would wrap my knees. And then when I started working with Kevin, he goes, "Guess you're going to have to learn how to wrap your own knees. What if I'm not there?" And when you think about it, it's such a surreal thought that if you're relying on somebody else to wrap your knees and they get a flat tire, they're sick
Yeah.
that day. What are you going to do? And I will never forget the first day that I had to wrap my own knees at odd lifts, and we were over 600 pounds. So this is the first time I'm wrapping my own knees in this way, not to mention being ridiculed as to how I was doing it all along the way. But ultimately, like anything else, practice, practice, practice. I
Mm-hmm.
actually found a video online that Joe Sullivan did for Elite FTS and mimicked his way to wrap my knees, and it worked out
Oh
brilliantly.
yeah.
And in that meet, I hit a 650 squat, a 385 bench, and then the 755 deadlift that I've been chasing ever since. You know, so I it was good and it was bad training in wraps. The
Mm-hmm.
problem with that is, again, of being an elder statesman in age, the pressure on my knees was causing fluid buildup.
Ah, okay.
So during the course of a meat prep, I would get what's called a Baker's cyst, which is just a pocket of fluid in the back of the knee, and I would get them in either my right or my left, and I'm having anywhere from 3 to 6 cc's of fluid pulled out of each knee, to the
Jeez.
point where after that meet in Toledo, I said I can't do it anymore because I'm essentially crippling myself.
Mm-hmm.
So we talk about steps backwards. You want to talk about learning how to squat again in just sleeves. So it's a rude awakening because a good wrap on your knees can jump your squats 100 pounds.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it is definitely something that you want to think about as you build up that sleeve strength. But I haven't competed in wraps since then because it was destroying my knees, and they were already arthritic, much less having to have fluid pulled out all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So at that point, again, you have to ask yourself, "Hey, dum dum, what are you going to do to change this?" And I am extremely happy on how things are going in training in sleeves.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that meet, um, I was able to go 9 for 9, and again, still chasing that bench PR, still chasing that deadlift PR.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to set a sleeve PR in the last meet that I did at 584.
Oh wow.
So I'm hoping to get into the sixes in October with the rest of the odd lifts crew, and hopefully get over that 385 benchmark. I'm deadlifts are going really well. I might, depending on how the day is going, we're going to read the tea leaves that day. If because unfortunately chipping 755 is going up like 761.
Mm. Okay.
So it's determining whether or not we make that big of a jump, how the day is going. I'm competing against Dan Allison, and
Oh,
we call
okay.
it Battle of the Baldies. So he beat me on totals last time, and this time I was smart enough to go dots because he's starting to pull into the sevens,
Mm-hmm.
and I was almost able to make up what he surpassed me on in wraps, because he lifts in wraps, I lived in sleeves, and I said, okay, well, I'll just and our bench is almost identical.
Okay.
So I said I'll just try to make it up on the deadlift, and I fell 16 pounds short.
Oh,
So yeah, so it's we're trying to evolve a little bit, as we start to look at, things that impact our lifting. And wraps was just one of the things that I just I couldn't sustain.
yeah.
So I'm extremely happy to be comfortable in getting stronger in sleeves. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know that I'll ever reach the 650 or 660 mark, but it'll be a huge accomplishment for me to be able to get into the sixes in sleeves.
Yeah, wraps are. I've only tried them a couple times, honestly, and they're difficult to get used to. They're kind of
Yeah.
uncomfortable to get used to. And you see these big guys like obviously Ronnie Coleman squatting, and how he is now, like he can barely walk in that. It is dangerous and it is difficult to do that, knowing like you are kind of crippling yourself, like doing all this weight. I mean, it's some heavy ass weight, like he says.
Yeah.
But that's good that you're still like working up to it, like with sleeves and everything. You're building. I think you're probably building your own strength more with that.
Oh, there's absolutely no doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt in my mind. When I look back at, some of the videos that I have, I think my quads are probably almost twice the size that they were that when I was competing in wraps.
Wow.
You just have to have that overall strength, and I've always, probably squatted a bit lower than most people do, which also really builds on the quads, and as you're building up that the hamstring and glutes and the quads. So I'm really engaging all of that because I'm squatting so low. But to me, at least for how I want to be able to compete, sleeves and they've come a long way in sleeves.
Mm-hmm.
Back in, when I did my first meet, SBD was the only sleeve out there, and it was,
Yeah.
it was, a couple millimeters thick. Now they're 7 millimeters thick, and some people are calling them single ply, so, but, I'll take it. Again, unfortunately, my knees are the weak link in the whole, posterior chain.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. Yeah. SBD. That's the ones that we use. So we've been using them forever. How is like your training regimen? Like, how is it right now? How has it changed, and how's your like recovery routine?
that's a fantastic question. Recovery.
Mm-hmm.
That is huge. So, for me, it has been open communication with Trevor.
Okay.
So he takes conjugate methods that they would generally do in a week, whether it's you know you know strength building, hypertrophy, taper, or peak, however they wanted to
Mm-hmm.
look at it. Um, he takes those what would be weak in a conjugate form and turns those into a 5 week block.
Oh wow. Okay.
So he'll change those every 5 weeks. So we've got a little bit of an odd. I think we're 7 weeks today to the October meet. So communicating with him, we're going to go 3 heavy weeks. We'll do 2 taper weeks, and then we'll have the week before the meet that we'll kind of pick up the intensity again, and then the week of the meet, it's generally like a 50% deload type, but he still has me doing all 3 lifts up to Wednesday of the meet.
Okay.
So right now, we're changing things up. Squats, we'll be using a buffalo bar a little bit. It's got a little bit of a camber to it, to give my shoulders a little bit of rest as we start to get into the end of the meet. So right now, the next 3 weeks, they're going to be challenging because there's some new exercises. So we start with some heavy squats, getting up to an RPE 8. And I have some accessories after that. For bench, I do like my first set will be anywhere from 82 to 85% for a clean single, all
Nice.
paused. And then I'll have, let's say, a 3x5 at a lower percentage, also all paused. Deadlifts, this is the first time that we won't be doing just a conventional deadlift. We'll be doing, I've got deficit for, I think, a 3x5, and then banded
Oh okay.
for a 3x5, all to an RPE 8 ish. So he is extremely great at varying the exercises, but he is extremely focused on lifts and exercises that are going to impact the platform.
Yeah.
So he's very efficient and very selective about his exercises. And the cool thing is if there's a specific exercise that I'm not 100% sure about, I just video it and send it to him, and I get instant feedback. So I get corrections. And the cool thing is when all the guys that I lifts watch the video, they're like, well, we're not sure. And then I'll say, okay, well, Trevor told me this, this, and this to look for. Those guys instantly remember those corrections for the next time that I do it, to make sure that I'm not hitting what they think, but I've conveyed what my coach wants to see, and they're helping me emphasize those corrections when I'm doing that lift. So
Yeah.
I've got second, third, and fourth set of eyes to make sure that I'm incorporating what Trevor wants me to fix, and making sure that these guys are making sure that I'm staying focused in where in line.
Yeah, it's good to have like a variety of things you do, like different styles of training, because you may not know like this is going to help you tremendously, and it's just good to not get so used to
Yeah.
the way you train, you know.
And honestly, it's not boring.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
every 5 weeks, my training changes slightly, but it's still based around what we're going to do on the platform. It started off with heavy SSB. Then we
Mhm.
went to straight bar. Now we're using buffalo bar. Deadlifts were, I would do a lot of snatch grips. I'd never done snatch grips. I was doing deficit snatch grips, regular snatch grip RDL. So he is working. He's creating something different, and I'm pretty damn excited to be a part of
Yeah.
it.
That's awesome. I can't wait for you to do that. I hope everything, goes well and
Yeah, knock on wood. Yeah, because you know the really awesome thing about having someone like Dan, who is he and I are tremendous friends, but also tremendous competitors.
mhm.
And there were multiple days as we were leading up to the last meet that I had a 10% range of what I needed to hit on a squat, and based on how good Dan was squatting, I was upping my percentages. So you talk about having those people around you, and it's also driving that competitive nature in a healthy way.
Yeah.
And you just watch him smoke something, you're like, well, shit, add more on, and we both talked after the meet and said we had never had a better prep, just based on kind of leveraging how the other was doing. And to me, that is priceless.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. How does your diet look like right now?
So, because I still have kind of, I still have, some digestive issues. So obviously, those are things that I have to deal with. But honestly, I don't vary far from my bodybuilding diet.
Mhm.
I'm about 3,800 calories, most of it chicken and rice. I will tell you, is it that strict all the time? No. The other day I got stuck at work and I didn't have meals with me. And for me, my go to is, three Burger King cheeseburgers.
Yeah.
So is it always bodybuilder clean? No.
No.
But I had a very smart guy tell me one time is it's better to make the right decisions 80% of the time and be happy than make the right decision 100% of the time and being miserable. So
Mm.
I'm on that 80%, where 80% of my diet is chicken and rice and lean beef, and the other 20% is going out to having an amazing dinner with my wife, or
Yeah.
with Kevin and his lovely wife, to be able to live a normal life. And to me, it's all about balance.
Mhm.
And so I feel my best when I am eating the chicken and rice and lean beef.
Yeah.
If I eat like garbage, I feel like garbage, I train like garbage.
Mhm.
And you talked about recovery. Trevor does an amazing job in understanding my age and understanding that I need a bit more time to recover. And
Mhm.
we were talking about it at the gym this morning. As adults, we have to normalize a bedtime. I have different devices that help track my sleep to make sure I'm getting enough deep sleep, enough REM, and I always joke it's another device to tell me I'm failing at something, but it
Yeah.
also keeps me in check. because sleep is so underrated as a recovery tool, that as you get older, it's something that it's truly going to help. And I found that about 7.5 hours is my sweet spot. Anything more or less, and I'm just not, I'm feeling sluggish.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm doing everything I can to keep things consistent and to set myself up for success.
Yeah. Yeah, sleep is definitely really important. I mean, it's something that I struggle with. I mean, I just don't have a good sleep schedule. I just don't. So I just don't like
Yeah,
going to bed.
yeah,
But it is, I mean, and there is such thing as too much sleep too. You
yeah,
can feel just as tired sleeping too much than not getting enough sleep. So, especially when you're training and lifting these heavy weights, like, sleep is very important for recovery.
yeah. So
Yeah.
and it's gauging all of that to find a happy balance between, um, because obviously what I'm doing is time away from my wife and the time
Mm-hmm.
that we get to spend together. She's been an absolute trooper in supporting me in this, and she's my biggest fan, and I love it. So we just want to make sure that, I leave enough time to make sure that we have time together and build on our relationships and having the relationship PRs as much as I'm having with a gym PR.
Yeah, that's important too, man, to have that support system at home for sure. I
Yeah,
mean, with your significant other. That is more important than I think a lot of people realize. Is like to be like to have that support of what you do, what you love, and with the people that love you to support you. That's just, priceless.
yeah, it absolutely is, because without it, um, that friction starts to happen, and that nasty thing we call cortisol starts to creep into your body as the
Mm-hmm.
stress starts to take over the body.
Yeah.
So yes, I'm, very, very blessed to have, her in my corner when it comes to this sport. So, when it's outside of powerlifting, I cater to her, wants and needs because she deserves it. And I get what I need out of the gym. I need to make sure she gets what she needs out of things that she needs to do, and out of me, and just the relationship aspect.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing, man. And also like circling back with recovery, do you ever do like cold baths or like saunas? Do you ever?
No, and there's so for a minute I tried, cryotherapy, where you got into the booth and it was like minus 1,000 degrees, and
Yeah.
it was one of those things that if some of the studies that I've read is it starts to hamper hypertrophy.
Mm.
So even though I am not doing a bodybuilding style of workout, I'm still building muscle.
Yeah.
And if after what I'm doing, I do a cold plunge, from what I've read, it can really inhibit that muscle growth and muscle regeneration.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that I do like the thoughts of a sauna. In our next house, we may have a sauna, and I do see a lot of the, they talk about, a half hour at X amount of degrees, how beneficial it is for your body. But I have not done it. I might take advantage of them over at Omnivo. I know that they've got a cold plunge too, but again, I've never done a cold plunge, just based on some of the, I don't want to say that they're negative, but at the same time, I'm trying to build as much, whether it's lean muscle or whatever it is, we at a lower rep range that we're going to create. I want to make sure that I'm not inhibiting that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, with somebody else that we talked to as well, talking about like an ice bath, it is because it limits like inflammation. Like you honestly, you want inflammation when you're building muscle.
Yeah,
So I always thought, well, if I were to do this, I would probably rather do like a cold plunge in the morning, like right when I get up before a workout, and then saunas like immediately after a workout, because I feel
yeah.
like that would be a good balance. But I've heard the same thing that it's just not, it's not the best option if you're trying to build as much muscle as possible. So,
Right. Yeah. And I,
yeah.
I would say the same thing. To be able to get your day started, there'd be nothing like a
Yes.
cold plunge
That's what
and then a sauna.
I think I could
Talk
quit
about a
coffee.
slap in the face to get the day going. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I agree with that. And with the cryo chambers, you needed to do it, 4 and 5 times a week. You got to
Yeah.
be extremely careful with that, and you have to make sure the device is getting to X amount of, so there's just at that point, if I've got to put more effort than I need to into recovery, to me, it's just not worth it.
Yeah, we were talking to somebody else on here last year, talking about the cryo chambers, and it seems kind of dangerous. Like you can't sweat or something because of the how cold it gets, and I feel like it's too much to worry about.
I'm trying to remember the football player a couple years ago. You have to wear slippers. There's special slippers in there,
Yeah.
and they didn't put slippers on him, and he got frostbite on
Oh,
his feet. So, I mean, you're taking this thing to extreme sub-zero temperatures.
just not worth
You
it.
know, no, exactly.
Yeah.
And if you're not careful, you can get hurt. It is probably one of the most. Um, it is an experience. It's tough to describe with how cold it gets. And
Mm-hmm.
then, you're thinking. I think I was in there maybe for 5 minutes, and it felt like 5 hours.
Yeah.
It's like time stood still. So it is, again, if you don't have the right person that's coaching you through it or doesn't know what they're doing, you can get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's obviously not something that we want when we're talking recovery,
Yeah.
because you're supposed to be trying to, fix what is ailing you in the recovery process, not making things worse.
Yeah, that it just counters it. So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. Yeah, I wanted to ask too, so with with your powerlifting and bodybuilding journey, once this is all said and done, what do you want like your legacy to be? Like what do you want to be remembered for in these sports? What do you want your legacy to be? What do you want people to talk about that you've hit, either like within your community of powerlifting or just personally?
For me, it's that I gave back.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we think about, um, well, as silly as it sounds, I get just as much pleasure out of handling lifters as I do competing. Um, for me, one of the biggest, um, I think, to be able to give back to Kevin and the guys, we were all set to go out to Vegas to compete in the meet out there, and I wasn't able to compete. I had, again, that's when I was dealing with a shoulder problem, but I wanted to go out and help them. And if anything that I did help them in the smallest way, if it made them easier, to not have to worry about how many lifters they were, do they need, do you need chalk? Do you need, the, snappers for the inhalant, and stuff like that. If there was anything that I did that just made it just one iota better for them to compete, I was happy. And that's, if I look back on this, if they say, you know what, anytime we asked him to help, he helped. Anytime I asked him for advice, he gave me his advice without being judgmental. So to me, that is what this sport is all about: is live, learn, and pass on.
Well, that's great, man. That's beautiful. And anything else like for our viewers, what's any like words of wisdom you'd want to give?
I think that in itself
Yeah.
is, we were all that newbie in the gym,
Mm-hmm.
and it's unfortunate that, there are pages dedicated to people getting mocked in the gym, and that's why people don't go to the gym. Um, you
Yeah.
know, be that person that helps the new person.
Yeah.
And I think the fulfillment that you'll get in seeing how they light up and recognize that someone is struggling with something, say, "Hey, can I help you?"
Mm-hmm.
And there are ways to approach to help somebody rather than just offering unsolicited advice. If everything is done with respect, um, there have been plenty of gyms that I've been in that, I don't know anybody, and there's always somebody that's come up to me and said, "Hey, how's it going? Can I help? Can I do this?" And it
Yeah.
absolutely changes how I look at that gym. So if I could offer any advice, remember that you were a first person in a gym at one time,
Yeah.
and extend the courtesy of helping somebody that you see that may need some help.
Yeah, that's a big thing too, is like I don't think people realize how much people in the gym help one another. Everybody's so nervous starting it out, but no, people want to help you. I mean, majority,
Yeah.
99%. Like, yes, some gyms are going to have a jerk or something, but
Yeah, I mean, it's laws of averages at that point, right?
yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And there's always somebody that'll come up and said, "God, I didn't want to approach you because I was afraid." And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, but anytime you need something, I am here.
Yeah.
When Britton and I were at Powerhouse, we had some of the trainers coming up and because we were doing some band work. They were asking us, "Hey, where did you get that? How do you set this up?" And I'm like, "Hey, let me just finish here and we'll go through the whole setup and I'll tell you what it gets you. Here's the chart for the resistance. Work this in with your athletes." So again, to me, if someone asks, I'm not going to be a douche.
Yeah.
I want, and it's to me, it's all about making them feel like they belong, because you never know what somebody's going through.
Exactly. Exactly. Especially in the gym, it's borderline like therapy for people too.
Well,
So
that no truer words have been spoken.
yeah.
I don't know where I would be without being able to get into a gym and see my boys and be able to really get you know everything out from the week's worth of shit, and
Yeah.
you're able just to cleanse yourself after just a healthy day of just mixing it up with your boys.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, where can people find you though, on Instagram or on any social media?
On Instagram, I'm oddliftsdemo,
Okay.
Demo. Easy to find, and that's where I reside. And name is Don Demetrakeas. Reach out if you have any questions. Be happy to help you out.
All right. Perfect. Yeah, thanks, man. Thank you so much for coming on the show and everything, and talking your knowledge and everything. It was great talking to you. And maybe I'll see you at Odd Lifts one day. We plan to go out there, so
That would be fantastic.
yeah.
Again, I really appreciate you having me on, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about how I've gotten through some of the obstacles I have in my life.
Yeah, absolutely, Don. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
great
Thanks,
day.
you too. It was great talking to Don. It was pretty cool to see that he came from bodybuilding and transferred to powerlifting. So that's pretty cool. And he's got some crazy numbers. It was nice talking to him about, his lifting experience, his recovery, and, how long he's been training for. All right, these are dead. I don't know if I want to really try these, but Devin has a new one. He's not here today. He missed out. But when he comes back, I'm making him bring the new one. These don't work. They're dead. Double barrel. Got to buy another double barrel. They're really good. A little something, but not enough. Yeah, Devin's gonna bring that new one next time he's here, so I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, thanks guys for watching. We appreciate everybody that watches and listens to us, and yeah, we'll see you on the next one. Peace.